Well, hi everybody. Hi and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Mark Sorge. I oversee the sales effort for CWE, and I will be your moderator today. We are happy today to take a look at technical operations and the corresponding data management within organizations. This discussion is designed to be informal and interactive, so please ask questions which will improve everybody's learning experience. Now, no matter your degree of involvement with data within different service lines, this review of technical operations is designed for you. This webinar will help everyone to understand a bit better the challenges being faced by mid and senior managers in a variety of industries and define why the CWE platforms and solutions have been developed. Okay, some quick housekeeping. For today's webinars, we will be using Teams Live Events. It's a really cool tool. I'll help everyone customize your experience. You will see the attendee controls on the bottom of the screen, basic stuff, pause screen, volume control, live. After you pause, you can catch up on the live stream, and the timer. I don't use it very much, but it'll let you know where you are in the stream versus the live stream. Okay, I'm going to get started with some introductions. It is my pleasure to introduce our key speaker today, Chris Beall. Chris has been with CWE since 2013 and is an accomplished speaker. Chris has over 8 years of experience in the technology, consulting, data analytics industry, and brings strong client relationship practices. Chris frequently speaks on topics of technology, analytics, and overall performance management. In fact, some highlights include Chris speaking at the IoT Solutions World Conference in Barcelona, Spain. Okay, Chris, please begin by defining technical operations.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Mark. So starting with what is technical operations, I know most of you here probably have a variety of different roles that sit underneath this classification. So wanted to just level set and look exactly what we mean as we talk about technical ops. We break this down into really 3 main categories: facilities and engineering, business support services, and hospitality services. Together, these 3 main categories break down into 24 primary service lines that you see in the buckets on the screen. And then for an example here, you may have food services, and under food services, you have cafeteria, and then you have vending machines. So as you start to look at this matrix and how the technical operations break down, you're really looking at over 5,000 discrete service lines. And it typically makes up about 25% of an organization's total operating expense. So in technical operations, accounting for those 5,000 service lines, many departments that hold their responsibilities, many of systems, there are just challenges that arise from this sophistication and this network. Looking at some of those challenges, I think it's the magnitude or the volume of systems, especially in enterprise or large organizations that are spread out geographically, organizations that have gone through a lot of acquisitions and mergers, just causes these applications to be discrete. You may have many CMMS systems or many ERP systems because of this type of activity. Many of these systems are not hosted by the organization, so they're hosted by third parties. Many of them may be service providers that you outsource your laundry or you outsource your food services. That data and the performance of that service line is now held within the system of that service provider. As you look at these type of systems, they rarely communicate together because they're hosted by different vendors. They're set up on different databases. They have different communication protocols. They all have varying integration capabilities, which from an owner's perspective or a VP of operations makes it challenging just to get to the visibility of how you're performing. So, a lot of these challenges come together. As I mentioned, the acquisition and mergers, a lot of that activity going on, especially in the healthcare and manufacturing space. So with this disparate configuration or fragmented environment, it's hard to identify process improvement opportunities. It's hard to justify the cost reduction initiatives. Why are we going to make this change? What's the impact technically, operationally, and financially? And then how do you measure the savings of these initiatives if this data isn't connected? So as we look to the graph in the middle, we see in this technical operations in these three broad categories, a series of prime applications. You look at these categories and you probably think of the systems that you have, especially around accounting or finance, it may be ERP systems and asset management. This is a cool little resource that I'll provide to everyone after the presentation. But what I've done is I've gone through for each one of these buckets, applied the systems that people buy. So as you click on real estate management system, what you'll see here is I've connected to a provider that goes out and looks at all of the real estate systems. It scores them, how well are they? So this is really the challenge, is that you may have one or you may have multiple, and you start to get into things like accounting systems, and you see there's 120 of these systems. Right, so for each one of these buckets, there's many systems, and some are better than others, but it's mostly about how are your teams and your processes configured and which tools best used. As you start to look at the data sources here, there's a magnitude of data. Some of that's being updated monthly, some weekly, some down to the second if it's into the automation systems and IoT. So it's just a webbing that's pretty messy until you start to organize it. Two things that I'll mention is I think every organization is looking at how do we improve our processes. So how do you assess how you're performing today, your metrics, what teams are involved, what's best practice, and then how do we manage those opportunities? How are we going to deploy them? What's the cost? What's the benefit? What's the savings? And without a good structure around this technical operations, that activity is hard. There are a series of tools that start to help bring some continuity and structure to this mess. Things like business intelligence tools, data warehouses or data lakes, integration tools. And that's really the strategy that we're going to start to look at today, recognizing you probably have many of these systems. They aren't communicating well today. You don't have great visibility from the top of the organization. So how can we begin to change that? And what is the impact on our organization? So with that, I'm going to transition to the broken link, right? And I think the broken link here is that many organizations have made large investments into these transactional and single point systems. These are where the workers are doing work and processes are being run and reporting is being performed. But the challenge there is that it's spread across all of these systems. So you're having to navigate into the ERP system to get information or metrics around financials or suppliers, and you're having to then jump into your real estate system to see how many properties are owned or leases. So as you look to a program of bringing this together and creating that one view type of visibility, you must have the right analytics teams. You must leverage the service line experts or call them department heads. And then you must configure the technologies to start to communicate and orchestrate this view. One fact that I found from Forbes, and this was about a year ago, but 67% of enterprises are relying on data integration to support their business intelligence platforms. And another 24% are planning to do that in the next 12 months. That means most organizations have already begun that process, right? It's a vital process in this digitization of how do we take all of these investments, leverage the data sources, and start to be very strategic and data-driven with our organization. So from here, understanding the industry challenge and what's broken here is what do we do about it? And here at the Collaborative Work Environment, we help our customers develop strategies and then execute upon those with tools and solutions and change management and resources of our own. So I'm
Chris, we've lost you.
the objectives. And then it's taking that information to then go design a solution. What is the reporting requirements? How is this going to change our process? How are we going to collect the information? What tools are going to be needed? And that really is all done before you then go deliver a solution. And what we found is sort of taking this define and design stage, we call that a conference room model, right? Is that you can reduce your upfront risk and you can reduce your upfront cost by doing a lot of this fact finding and mock-up, which you can start to engage teams and collaborate on and make sure that you really get to an understanding of how this tool is going to be used, what's the benefit to your organization before you then go spend the price tag to deliver it across in full.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's great. That's a great process. Can you tell us a little bit more about the conference room scheduling module?
Yeah, absolutely. So the conference room model, as we call it, is really look at it as a prototype or a proof of value. But the process that we take here in our conference room models, following that define and design, is to start with inventorying and extracting the raw data sources. So this is looking at what systems support each department, what data is within those, and then how can we start to extract that data to share with other systems and up into a centralized reporting tool. The next step in that process is when you've extracted that all of the data that are going to be necessary to report on, is to create a series of mappings, right? And this is a large data challenge that each one of these applications probably has a different name for a facility, right? So they're not consistent. It's not easy to start to correlate the data sets. So we're going to take every single application, we're going to standardize a facility name and a service line, and we're going to start to map these data sources consistently so you get this data model that allows or enables us to create the visualizations. This next step or activity I think is crucial. This is 80% of this strategy is about the data management. Where is it at? How are we going to integrate to it? How do we do the quality control that we've got good data? And then how do we operationalize those integrations? So at this level, you're not going and connecting to APIs and setting it all up, but you are looking at every system. You're meeting it at its most stable integration point, and you're jotting down how are we going to connect to that when we go deliver. And then the last piece here is leveraging this information, sitting down with your executives and key stakeholders of the organization and defining the requirements for reporting. A lot of these things you probably know and you have manual reports that you're doing today, but now that we have the data collected and we have the right tools, what are those metrics? And this is where it starts to get fun, because you can start to be collaborative and you can pull up a whiteboard, or you can pull up a paint center, and you can start to put the things that you want to see and go through a couple of workshops or iterations of how that looks and what filters are we going to have, but really getting you to this is the solution and this is the requirements that we want and what's it going to cost us to do that. So this conference room model, I'm going to take you through an example that we did with a customer. This next slide that you see is we sat down and this was really focused a lot around the facility management and finance systems, but we said, let's sort of break down the FM space and what systems do we have and what are they responsible for reporting on. And you see, from a property perspective, many organizations have a couple different sources of truth. They may have an Excel spreadsheet, they may have a utility system, which is always good because if we're running utilities, it's probably active. Asset management, it is very common that you have asset listings and CMMS, and those two aren't always the same. So how can we start to bring these together? What we saw is that they had about 12 systems that they were operating in their portfolio. This was about 15 large hospitals, about 8 million square feet. So we inventoried them all, we sort of put them in their buckets. And what we saw is that this roll-up dashboard is going to contain many systems. Once we went through this process of what systems are out there, we started to extract the data. And really that process here is to create a common data model. Those that aren't familiar with this type of graphic, this is a table out of a database, and what you see is these green lines of how we're starting to connect all of these data sources together. This is very complex, and this is probably the most important part of the strategy, as I mentioned before. 80% of the time is spent getting the data, organizing it, mapping it, and then staging that data for reporting purposes. So we've now inventoried the data, we've created a common data model, and now it's time to take that data and build the reports that you've decided on with your organization. There's a series of dashboards that I'm going to show you here, but really what this allows your team to do is enable process improvement. So a lot of this data coming together, you can now begin to baseline expenses, delivery models, and who's performing that services. And as you identify changes in your organization that you want to make, you now have the mechanism or the tool to track those savings down to a GL or an AP account, or down to a specific vendor, or down to a specific service line. So taking a look at a few of these dashboards, what I've done here is just created a quick 2-minute clip of a demo system of ours. And what you can see is that because of this tool's position, right, it's to sit above these applications and not replace them, is that it's pretty simplistic. So we've created some modules for reporting. We can navigate that from the home page. You see that you can't really go anywhere else. So we're going to first look at the property management, and this would be pulling out of an Excel spreadsheet or your property management software, reporting on where your property's at, how many you have, ownership status, leased or owned, how many square footage do we have across that space, and then the property metrics can be added, right? What I love about this tool is it's so configurable, right? It's a business intelligence tool where you can add or take in or add different report styles. So what you saw in that last, we navigated from that dashboard into the source application that you see at the bottom there, and then back into the system. So as we come back out of property, we're going to jump into financials. Again, you see this could be pulling from many ERP systems, and we'll create the mappings to standardize across the top. You can select the facility in the upper left, but really this is a slice at how are we performing financially. We can break that down into service lines. If you have categories of yourself, we can do that. Otherwise, we hold a standard service line, and then it gives you access to all the details. If we want to look at a service line, we can select. We can look at that over annual time frame, a quarter, or down to a month. Again, at the bottom, you see where that data is then fed into. So as we come back out, I'm going to show you the roll up really of a lot of these modules and systems into one single dashboard that we call the FM dashboard. So across the top here, you're looking at expenses. This is our budget to our actual expense. You drop down one layer, you start to get into water treatment and alarm counts out of building automation systems, construction projects. The third row there gets into energy conservation measures and how that's affecting energy use intensity within that facility. So as a recap here, I mean, this is the end product, right? The visualization of many data sources and many service lines into one view. And again, this tool enables the organization to just make better decisions and start to track the improvements and report that back to senior stakeholders at the end of the year. So with that, I would like to open it up to questions from the crowd. So I'll give you a few minutes. Again, you have the Q&A question tab on the right. You can enter in a question and we'll respond to those here for a few minutes. Moderator, do we have any questions that have come in so far?
Yeah, we've got a couple questions. Our first question would be, how long does this strategy usually take to implement?
Yeah, great question, and one we get often. So in our experience, we found that conference room model takes between 90 to 120 working days. Obviously, that depends on how many systems and the priority and the resource availability of the organization, but understanding the systems, building up that mock report, and really understanding what the deployment of a full system would look like is in that time frame. As you look at delivering this solution and actually connecting to those live data sources and finalizing the reporting and going through all of the data quality checks and fixes within systems themselves, it's about a 9 to 12 month process. Really, by the 12th month, the system and the integration should be active and running. Your data quality is in a spot where you trust the reports, and you're now using this to drive and steer the organization.
Great. So our second question, what do you see as the cost to start up and maintain a program like this?
Yeah. So we get this question often, right? And cost. Many organizations are familiar with the $1 million price tags of large ERP systems or integrated workplace management systems. What's nice about this approach and this strategy is you're leveraging those investments you've already made. The cost to implement this integration layer in reporting is minimal compared to those system deployments. We typically see that it's about $150,000, maybe getting up to a $300,000 max to get all the systems connected. And then from a software as a service, making sure the reports are active, the data quality is maintained, sort of typical maintenance and support is about $150,000 to $200,000 a year. So as you look at what type of data this is consuming, the type of value it brings to drive the organization, and relative cost to other applications, we typically see that it's justified within the organizations we deploy in.
Awesome. So our third question, what if I have internal resources or technologies that focus on this?
Yeah, another good question. And this is very common. Most large enterprises have analytics teams, and they have a variety of tools to do that work. What we find is that many of those analytics teams are focused sort of front of house revenue generating activity and not in this technical operations, a lot of back of house activities. So we love when there's resources and technologies that are already existing in the organization. We want to continue to leverage those and augment those resources. We bring a unique skill set and domain expertise to focus on a sliver of the business that's typically overlooked. And our team, augmenting an internal resource or technology allows them to go focus on other important things within the business. So I wouldn't let that be a showstopper if you did have, resources. We always start out by looking at what you do have in place and what systems support that.
Great. So that's all the questions we have for now.
Awesome. Well, I personally want to thank everyone for coming to today's webinar. I know we're going to finish up a little bit early here, give you 5 minutes back of your day. We're here to support you as you understand this space and the challenges. We're certainly happy to show you more of the solutions that we've created or use cases for our customers. I provided my contact information here. Please feel free to reach out to me. And if there were any questions that we didn't get to in the show here, follow up with us and we'll get those answered. Thanks again for joining. Have a good day.